Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Cancast. We have two fabulous guests with us today from the Conservative Drug Reform Group. We've got Amber Moore, who's the Senior Research and Policy Advisor. I don't know why I find that title really hard to say, but we've managed it. And we've got MP Crispin Blunt, fabulous chairman of the group. And today we're just going to be talking a little bit about what they've got going on. So thanks for joining me, guys. It's lovely to see you.
Great
to see you, Carly.
So part A of your report, which everyone I'm hoping will be familiar with, but I'll make sure to link it, was completed last year. Is that right?
May, I think.
2020?
Do you publish it in May, Amber?
April or May last year. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So how did it go down? How was it received?
Well, I had no hand in writing most of it, apart from the introduction, the foreword, and setting it. The guts of it are work done by Amber and her colleague Dave King, and I'm incredibly proud of the CDRG team. And Part A is no small part of the pride I feel in the quality of the work that the team's done. And it was a really good analysis of how 18 months of regulation and new legislation in the medicine from cannabis space, how things have developed or not, and principally or not, and how it's left most people using cannabis for a medical purpose still in the clutches of either the criminal supply chain or being formerly criminals themselves by growing their own medicine. And to have a paper that was then properly peer-reviewed by academics, advised by our great policy council who've lent their names and reputations to the work that we're doing, and then to produce a work that's now being used by many, many people who are engaged in policy work in this area or engaged in trying to supply people with medicine from cannabis as a guide as to how they can or can't navigate their way through the system, and the feedback has been terrific. And I'm, hats off to Amber and Dave principally for the work that they did in pulling it all together.
Absolutely, it was bloody thorough, and I thought that it captured what was going on the ground really well. And I think it was probably the first time people who had been in this space as patients or that have been really affected by this issue on the ground had actually seen that somebody had heard them and understood the issues. So from the community, thank you for that work, because it's really essential. At first I thought to completely break down what the issues were and what was going on right now for people in order for us to present some kind of a solution. And I guess that's what Part B is gonna try and do. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're getting on with Part B, Amber?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to bringing it out this year, because, like you say, Part A, it was a real undertaking to do, because it is such a complex area, or it's become such a complex area, particularly since the rescheduling. So it kind of required that level of detail so that everyone could actually truly understand what was going on and why it was quite complicated. And then through outlining it and what the obstacles are, Part B is very much going to be presenting what the possible solutions can be, of which, we've got a number of different obstacles. There's a number of different ways that we can approach and kind of attack those. So recently we had a roundtable with, some of the great members of our policy council, other people as well, yourself, you were there as well, Carly, and we're just trying to bring everyone together from the patient side, but also the legal side. We've got some experts in the legalities around cannabis and cannabis medicines, but also human rights people, which has been really interesting. Police, members of the police force as well as doctors and prescribers as well. And I think what's really exciting about this space is kind of the need to bring everybody together to try and find out what the most appropriate solution is for the UK, because I think what's also been difficult is we sometimes compare ourselves to Canada or the US, and we've got a very different healthcare system, and even the way that we police is very different. I remember somebody who was at our round table, Dr. Julie Mulkey, who prescribes in Denmark, said, she said the police don't really go after patients who are using cannabis. She was like, it's just not really a thing there. So we have different issues and different systems that require sort of more tailored approaches.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? This issue, it sits across so many of our institutions and so many of our processes as a country. So it sort of dips into law, it dips into social services, it dips into health, it dips into human rights, it dips into the legal system and the courts. And I think that a lot of people sort of sitting outside of this sort of more detailed knowledge of it sort of go, oh well, just this should be easy to sort out, just sort it out. But really it's unpicking so many things, isn't it? And there's so many people that sort of factor into this debate that it's really hard to see a way forward unless you bring everyone together. And I guess that's what I tried to do a bit with Cancard, is that I saw lots of people not communicating and thought, right, we need to pull everyone in to try and sort out a solution. And I guess since Part A with Cancard, rolled out, there has been a bit more of an awareness and a willingness to sort of shift and move into a grey area. But I'm sort of hoping when Part B comes out, we can see some more sort of solid ways of moving forward, or at least some options.
How Cancard fits, isn't it, into the greater landscape as well? Because obviously in an ideal world, we want people who need it to be prescribed it by their doctor as well. So we'll be looking at all of that and sort of as a whole. But like I say, I think what Part A does really well is really explain the details and the nuances of the situation. And we wanted that to be for everybody. So whether it was an MP, but also a patient who could actually understand, yes, these are these issues I'm experiencing and this is why it's happening. Which makes it a bit easier then to kind of see through the fog, so to speak, and kind of find a way forward. Because I think the main thing that comes forward is that, ultimately, I don't know anyone who wants to be criminalising individuals that have got chronic health conditions, long-term health conditions, who are using cannabis, responsibly or growing it responsibly. So they, maybe have a few plants. They're not breaking any other laws, and they truly find that this is a benefit for them, and they can't access it via, the NHS, or they can't afford to get it privately. And no one really wants to be criminalising these individuals. But unfortunately, as someone put it so well, police officers don't have anything to hang their hat on at the moment. So they haven't really got an alternative, which is why, obviously Cancard makes so much sense, because another thing I've seen is the police often feeling very uncomfortable and not happy about having to even arrest a patient. They don't want to be doing that. It creates a lot of harm, and as we've seen with numerous patients, a lot of the time by the time they've got to court, the whole thing's been dropped, but they spent a year of worrying about legal fees and what's going to happen to them, and it's really, really damaging, and no one actually wants that. So we're really at the point now where we need solutions that work, because it's creating a lot of harm, not just to patients, but it's further afield than that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the police that I've personally dealt with, like my, the officer that came and took my plants, she was in tears. Like, I was rushing around making her a cup of tea and getting biscuits and tissues. I was like, oh, so there's a real issue on, both sides of the fence, people that are struggling with the way things are. I suppose one of the things that is interesting to think about is, since you've done the research for Part A, because I know that research, you did a smashing job. The research for that was significant, but since then, we've obviously had a global pandemic, which has changed the country, our systems, and is is changing everything. And also we've seen a massive hit to our economy with COVID-19. And a lot of people now are sort of weighing up where cannabis could fit in with regards to a boost to the economy. What do we think about that as an idea?
Well, that is a fairly important point. What you also got to add is Brexit.
Yep.
So we've now got control of our own regulatory structure. And so that does provide an opportunity. And we are now actively looking at how we can change our regulatory structure to help our economy. And it's always been a challenge to Brexiteers who've been saying the economy has been tied down by, particularly by British gold plating of European regulations and the way in which in the UK has a tendency for officials to be very thorough about how they implement regulations. And what we need to do is actually have a regulatory structure that is properly implemented, but supports the policy objectives that the government actually sets for itself. Now, cannabis is a classic area where there is no sane policy objective that in many ways is underwritten by the regulatory structure. A classic example of unraveling this is the CBD business. The CBD business has been largely unregulated just becoming within the grasp of the European Food Standards Agency. The British Food Standards Agency has taken it over as it's now being classed as a novel food rather than as a medicine. But a vast number of people, £300 million worth of business, rising on current projections to £1 billion worth of business by 2025, is based around consumers' view of the benefits that they might get from CBD. Now, they've not been entitled to, the CBD industry hasn't been entitled to make those claims. Yet within the production of CBD, there will almost always be traces of THC because it comes from the cannabis plant and it's obviously full of any plant source material, even very highly refined, is liable to have trace elements of other elements of the plant within it. And our law sits that the slightest trace of THC in the most microcosmic fashion still makes the product illegal. And the truth is almost every CBD sale in the United Kingdom is a criminal offence, technically. But that's an insane place because for our policy to be, because the object of the policy must be is that presumably is that people cannot achieve a psychoactive effect from buying something that is purely or marketed as a CBD product. And you are going to be really pushed to find a CBD product, which is actually going to get you high because most of the THC has been taken out of it. And so, but what is the right level of THC, trace element of THC, to allow in a CBD product without requiring a standard of refinement scientifically that makes it impossibly expensive to deliver? Good question. And we're now focused on, in some of the other work that we're doing outside of Part A and Part B, on what does zero actually mean in practice? But what should it mean in policy terms? It's an issue that's being wrestled with by the World Health Organization. But sitting alongside cannabis as a medicine, you've then got cannabis as a wellness product in that part of the market. It's different. It's regulated differently. Who should be doing the regulations of it? And then you begin to look at it, and actually these are people who are going to actually own and have the same expertise as the people who are regulating cannabis as a medicine, who ought to be regulating cannabis as a medicine. And are they the same people who are currently in our current medicines regulator? Are they the people who are currently in our Food Standards Agency? Is there a case for a specialist regulator in this area? And that is something that other countries have, that's the route some other countries have gone down with regard to medicine. So you've got a specialist cannabis regulator sitting in, I think, certainly in Holland and in Denmark and in Australia and other countries. This is where Amber will know the exact list because she's the expert who does this all the time, and I'm the politician that skates over the surface, being able to present the headlines. But they're the kind of challenges that for a government looking to have a regulatory system that's going to support its industries and support the patient opportunities and support the business opportunities that come from a thriving CBD industry that could be onshored, where the plant is grown onshore, and you get the benefit of the hemp plant as well as then the flower from the marijuana plant. So you've then got, which is responsible for about 2/3 of the value of the plant. You've got an agricultural industry opportunity. You've got a bioscience opportunity. You've got obviously a straightforward economic return for the country and for the businesses and the people engaged. And you begin to see that there is actually a pile of opportunities here if we can have a regulatory structure that protects people from being ripped off when they buy a CBD product, for example, that protects them from any unintended toxicological effects from cannabis as a medicine, and also enables them to get prescribed a medicine with confidence that it's actually going to be able to address their illness and their symptoms of that illness. And equally at the same time, takes advantage of the fact that it's a plant-based medicine, and it's not something that is one molecule or one disease, and you can get a very precise pharmacological prescription by a doctor. And it is, for many people, as all the people who are growing their own medicine in the form of cannabis plants have worked out, it's a question of balance and experience about learning what is the right balance to cope with your disease and your symptoms at that time. And of course, diseases change and people's ages change. And so here we have an opportunity of a medicine that actually, if prescribed intelligently and with the flexibility that the cannabis, a plant-based medicine can provide in the form of cannabis, you could then have a certain knowledge and effectiveness of discovering what the right balance is in the medicine, in particular between THC and CBD elements of the medicine for that patient at that time, with that disease in the state that is in that time, and then understanding how the prescription might alter over time in order to best benefit the patient. And we are in the very, very early days of developing the pharmacology expertise and the medical expertise in this place to properly understand this is a new challenge for the medical profession. So you then suddenly throw up a whole raft of other issues about educating the medical profession into the opportunities that are potentially here. And so in all of this, we are treading in the foothills, but the opportunity that the regulatory structure and the medical education structure and the other parts of the system that are going to want to keep people properly safe, as well as taking advantage of the opportunities here, shaping that regulatory structure is now something that people now need to start turning their minds to pretty seriously.
Yeah, I think, with the recent news with CBD, obviously from the patient's perspective, there's been quite a lot of concern about the restrictions placed on the THC levels. And personally, I'm quite pro regulation in that I think that CBD companies selling to patients should have certificates of analysis to make sure that there's no heavy metals or crap in their CBD, but also to say that there is some CBD in there, because I know that some of the tests came back as just olive oil, didn't they? When there was a published sort of, independent testing.
And that's where there's a proper trading standards role to be played.
Yeah, but I think that at the moment, the new regulations, what they do is they take away that trace amount of THC, and that trace amount of THC for many is what is helping the entourage effect manage their condition. And we know for a fact that broad spectrum, which is whole plant with the THC taken out.
You can hold this for a second, can't you? Because I have someone at the door, and my partner is teaching a piano lesson, which she probably won't interrupt. So
Go for it. Bless him.
We'll just hold on, I guess. I've got some bits I want to say.
Have you? Okay, cool. All right.
No, just in agreement, because we've got step forwards, but we've still very much got this demonization of
THC
and THC, and it's a real issue, particularly when you look at these, and it's even if you take out what we would call adult use cannabis, even in the CBD world, you've got amounts of THC that aren't so psychoactive, but they do something, and it's
yeah.
We'll carry on.
Okay, I'll start that one again. Okay, so with regards to the new regulations around CBD, essentially what trading standards have said is that no trace of THC can be present in CBD products. And I think that has caused a lot of concern for patients who are using whole plant CBD, and that trace amount of THC is actually really important, as we know, for the entourage effect to help the body do what it needs to do in order to heal. And so broad spectrum or isolate are going to be the only two products which are going to be, permitted for sale. Now, broad spectrum is full spectrum with a chemical strip back of THC, and isolate is just CBD alone. And so there's some concern from patients that their CBD is no longer going to work for them. And that's a big thing at the moment with regards to the recent changes in trading standards. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, it's not a very intelligent place to be, because if it stops working, or they feel it stops working, what are they going to do? They're going to turn to the criminal supply chain. And you then have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of the policy? And if the object of the policy is to stop people getting high, then you need to ask yourself, can we cope with the trace element of THC in this product? And if so, how much is it? And if the purpose of the policy is to have a thriving CBD industry where people buying it can know what they're buying, and we have a successful industry, then you want an industry that is properly regulated, so that the trading standards and others are checking that what they claim is in the product, and there aren't toxins in there that shouldn't be there, and the product has been produced to a proper standard. But what you also want is a successful industry that can then be selling safe, reliable products to people, not only in the UK but around the world, and we can get a reputation for having a decent industry with a safe balance of the entourage effect of products within there that is not going to get people high, or have people then scoring on drug driving tests and the rest. And the other dangers that they might fall prey to under an intelligent application of policy objectives with the right regulatory framework. So these are all other issues that a new regulator or a regulatory framework and the legislation that goes around it needs to address.
And we've seen that happen already, because I think where there are certain products that are not easy to get in the UK, still, I now know people who buy CBD oil from their drug dealer, and the reason why is because they believe it helps with their anxiety, but they do want the sort of full spectrum product, and they believe, obviously they don't know what's in it because it's from the illicit market, but they'd actually rather pay for an illicit product which they believe is full spectrum and has the little bit of THC in it, not because they want to get high, but because there's this belief that there's the entourage effect and that activates the CBD. So yeah, if we take these products off the shelves, Crispin's totally right, as we're already seeing, you're just going to see all these people go to the illicit market, and then we're criminalising otherwise completely lawful people again, and it's sort of back to square one in a sense. So it's frustrating because it's not sensible, and it's not listening to why we're at this place in the first place, and why we need to regulate CBD, because people are already using it, and what we want is people to use properly regulated products and not prohibit some products just because they have tiny amounts of THC in them, because of this fear that maybe that will be abused. But I mean, even if CBD is quite expensive, but even if it was quite cheap, who's going to buy tens of £20 bottles, and that's a really cheap bottle of CBD, to drink enough to try and get high? And even if you did that, the CBD content would cancel it out anyway.
Yeah.
So, you could more easily have a problem with taking too many paracetamol.
So do we think it's a misunderstanding? Do we think it's stigma? Do we think it's issues from the Home Office? What's the fear? Where is the fear?
Well,
Lack of understanding, do we think?
it comes from who the lead regulator in this space has been, the Home Office.
Yep.
And the Home Office has been charged with protecting the UK from drugs that Parliament has determined will be, the government by treaty have determined will be prohibited. And it all comes from the 1961 UN Convention on the prohibition of narcotic drugs, and the policy that has then flown since then for the last 60 years. And it's 50 years since we passed that into legislation in the UK, and the Misuse of Drugs Act. And the Home Office's, the centerpiece of its objective has been to essentially say drugs are bad, they are banned, that the misuse of drugs is a serious evil to society and it must be prevented. And the deterrence message has overridden every other objective of policy. And the consequence of that, I saw as prisons minister, being visited out in the criminal justice system, is that we've taken a criminal justice approach to this, not a health approach to the misuse of drugs. And there is, of course, now an extremely lively global debate about prohibition, about whether that's the right way forward, that whether the war on drugs has in fact turned out to be an unqualified catastrophe right across the world, and that we would have been infinitely better taking a public health approach to this, and the kind of approach that American society eventually took to alcohol after prohibition, and that we've taken to alcohol and tobacco, two other types of drugs, and where through regulation and licensing about where they can be sold and the rest, and that we've then established a regime where the criminal supply chain has been reduced to almost nothing in the case of alcohol, except in prison, where it's banned, and around cigarettes, where obviously the very, very high rates of tax on cigarettes have helped finally, and the public health message is finally beginning to drop consumption of tobacco quite substantially now. But obviously the criminal supply chain flourishes because of the vast taxation on the product. But those are areas, that is a separate area of debate from medicine and wellness products. And what we have to do actually is to separate those two conversations out. And whilst the origin of the policy and the responsibility for the fact that we don't have the knowledge around medicine from cannabis that we ought to do, because we took the science and the research out when the product was prohibited globally from 1961 onwards, and then stuck in the most restricted category of all as far as research was concerned until 2 years ago, that we don't know as much as we ought to about medicine from cannabis, that we haven't had proper science and research of the scale that we will have had with other pharmaceuticals. And what we've got to do is to reassure people that this is the debate about medicine and about wellness products is not the same conversation as about prohibition. It might have the same cause as to why we're in the position that we're in, but they are separate policy conversations. And it's surely the case that we want to enable British patients to have access to prescribed medicines in a way that gives them the best opportunity to treat their symptoms and hopefully to recover from the conditions they've got, but at the very least be able to live with the conditions that they've got better than they might otherwise, and that these medicines might be significantly better than the current pharmaceuticals that are available to people if we understood them fully and properly, and we understood the endocannabinoid system fully and properly on the one hand, and that is a different conversation from the prohibition of narcotic drugs And the difficulty we've got here is that these medicines and these wellness products come from a product that has been prescribed. Now, no one is suggesting that medicines, whether they are from a prescribed product or not, should not be available if they're properly safe and properly tested to British patients, or indeed patients anywhere else in the world at all, for that matter.
Would there be a merit in utilising the community that are already consuming cannabis and giving them a regulated product and then using an observational study type model to then get some feedback and some insights that we could then use to move forward?
I think Amber's done some work in this space.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, but yeah, we could also say that COVID's been an issue, but that's not happening. And I know that was what was promised in terms of these children with these very severe epilepsies, some form of observational trial, and then that didn't happen. So we still have all of these children, who were so fundamental in the rescheduling of cannabis, still having to fork out thousands of pounds via, the private prescription, because they still can't get it on the NHS. So yes, we should be doing that, and we're not. So it means that other organisations, like Drug Science, for example, and the 2021, also other groups as well, are having to try and do that independently, which is brilliant. But obviously what we would like that to be is a national scheme. All that data can be collected in a sort of harmonious way and then properly analysed. But I totally agree, yes.
Fab. Okay.
No, and I think you're on a very strong point. How do we've no one knows the precise number, but obviously many tens of thousands of people are growing their own medicine. Many tens of thousands of people are doing their own unlicensed, illegal research into how do I make this medicine effective on my condition. It would be great if you could actually find a way to capture that research and that data, that raw data from individuals, in a way that was legal and could be properly relied upon and used. And I think with a bit of imagination, I might be able to find ways of enabling that to happen. And actually, your card is the kind of process that might enable that to happen. Where you, but whether you allowed people to grow the stuff at home, or whether you insisted it was grown in protected areas where it can be plants can be regulated and understood. No, and these are all things that ought to be up for grabs, and we ought to be thinking imaginatively about how we can take actually what is a wonderful resource in understanding MS, for example, the treatment of MS with cannabis-based products, of all the people who are growing the stuff illegally in order to treat their symptoms. I think if you capture all that information, you would take the treatment of MS significantly further forward.
Sounds like a challenge to me. Also, go on, Amber, go on.
I was going to say that, but that's why I know it's something you and I have spoken about, Carly, is that, there should be a system where these individuals, these patients, can send off the cannabis that they're using, that they believe works, so that they and also us as well can get an understanding of what profiles they're using. And are we seeing similarities? Does it turn out that MS patients seem to favour, one kind of combination and ratios of different contents compared to another? And a step on from that is we want to be looking at patients as well. We know we're still working in a backwards fashion. It's that we know about THC and we know about CBD, but there's all these other compounds in it, and we know that all animals have an endocannabinoid system, and we're still not looking closely at that. Whereas, are we seeing undersuppression or oversuppression of certain cannabinoids within people's endocannabinoid system, and is that a pattern we're seeing across different diseases? Because once we have an understanding of that, then we might know which sort of formulations of cannabis work best. Whereas at the moment we've got a situation, we've got these individuals figuring it out for themselves. sometimes brilliantly, sometimes less successfully. But there's this huge wealth of information there, and because it's criminalised, we're losing all of that, and it's such a shame, particularly given that the unique situation, or the unusual situation that we're in, is that the reason why we don't have the data is because of the Schedule 1 status, despite the fact that 20 years ago a House of Commons committee said to reschedule it back then. If we had rescheduled it 20 years ago, imagine what a different place we would be in. So it's not really these individuals' fault that the data isn't there. And there's a line in Part A where, from a patient, that says, why should I have to wait for it to be available on the NHS? And it's and that's the dilemma that the government really has got themselves into by not acting earlier when they should have done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was an evidence-based recommendation.
Absolutely. And I think since a few patients have been making freedom of information requests about, can you give me the foundation evidence, that there's a bit of a trend. There's like a trend in the cannabis community where they're sort of petitioning the Home Office for foundation evidence to suggest whether, to ask where the evidence is that this substance is harmful. And the responses have been actually quite funny, because they send a letter back saying they can't find it and maybe it's in the archives, which just makes me laugh. It's like they've misplaced it. I
feel so sorry for the individual who gets those emails, having to ask around, has anyone seen what the evidence is? Anyone?
Where did we put this evidence?
Have to be like, just we've lost it. We're not sure where it is. Apologies. Because obviously I think these are issues that go back so many decades, and now we've got everyone sort of floundering, because I think there is a fundamental issue with the Misuse of Drugs Act, and it is interesting, we're approaching the 50th anniversary. I think now is the time to revisit it, because it's not fit for purpose. We know that, and it needs to be changed, and I think we need to move to a public health approach. It just makes sense.
Absolutely.
And following the pattern that we're seeing globally as well.
Great. Well, I've only got one more question, and it's a bit naff, so apologies. But if I could give you like a magic wand, and you could like wave it over the cannabis space, and it could be however you want it to look, how would that be?
I would want a specialist plant-based medicine, or perhaps just cannabis, but a regulator in this space that had authority to make recommendations to the government and to oversee implementation of policy that really knew what it was doing.
What are you saying, Amber?
Well, mine's very kind of pie in the sky, but just imagine if we had all of the data that we needed, and how wonderful that would be. So if I could wave my magic wand, that would be it. So we're not kind of poking around in the dark so much, and having to make decisions with not all of the information at times, and then just better transparency as well, because like you say, the situation that we're at now, it's problematic that people are asking for, where is the evidence to justify the drugs being categorized in this way, and they don't have it. So we need people to stand up and say, okay, there's been an issue here, and we need to act, and we need to resolve this, and we need to amend our laws so that they're fit for purpose and work appropriately. So I think a recognition that there is an issue and we need to work on it would be such a simple ask, but that's what's very much needed, I think.
Absolutely. Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time today. It's been really cool to hang out and chat, and thank you for coming on the podcast. And good luck with Part B. I'm so excited to read it. I can't wait. When is it coming out? That Amber's going to give me a vague answer now.
Summer.
See? It's not even a month, it's a season.
She doesn't know it's going to be spring. You're not getting away with summer, Amber. We're having it by the spring. 15th of May is when spring finishes.
Brilliant. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, guys.
Right. Cheers.